program with personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Mr. Rice kind of snuck off me there with the control moving them here, and I wasn't paying much attention. Good morning, Mrs. Busby.
Hi.
How are you this morning?
Is it working?
Yeah,
Jim's got that deer in the headlights look.
Well, we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. I have what I think is a rather significant kudo. I picked this up by way of reading the local paper yesterday. You remember that paper, don't you?
I even remember yesterday.
Okay. There was a gentleman who needed a roof badly here in Lincoln. I take this right from the front page here. And it'll be a little tough doing it. Financing a little tough and so forth. And let me see here. Sundown Exteriors decided they'd been called in, and he knew that this gentleman really needed help, and he also knew that financing was very, very difficult. And so Sundown Exteriors, with the name of Zach Vest, and I don't know this gentleman at all, but he proceeded to help Mr. Don Hatfield. And he got a crew in there, a volunteer crew, and he had the materials donated. And when it was all said and done, Mr. Hatfield had a new roof. So kudos to Sundown Exteriors. And I'm not even sure, Tommy, you said that you thought they were in Bloomington?
I think so, yes.
Yes, well, I don't care if they're from Burtonview, Beeston, or Broadwell. They did a great job, and thank you very much, Sundown Exteriors.
People helping people. People
helping people. Now I have another public announcement to make here. Again, I have heard from our good friend Joe Shaler, the veteran's veteran. We appreciate all that Joe does on behalf of the veterans. Joe's a Vietnam veteran, and certainly those guys, I tip my hat to them. Monday, August the 7th is Purple Heart Day. They're having a ceremony at 6 p.m. on the east side of the courthouse at the flagpole. We'll be honoring all Logan County veterans, and more particularly Gold Star families for their sacrifices, and thanking our country for being all in Purple Heart County. We're trying to keep this to a 30-minute respectful and honorable ceremony. So I'd urge you to go next Monday. That would be August the 7th, 6 p.m., and swell the crowd there. Joe just does a great job, and he puts out PR all the time on behalf of the veterans. And Purple Heart Day is something we certainly all remember. I don't know whether anybody else in the listening audience, both of you out there, happened to watch the award of the Congressional Medal of Honor to a Vietnam veteran. A very moving experience to hear what that young man did as a medic, combat medic, and how he exposed himself to fire not once but many times to bring guys out of the field of fire. It was a very moving ceremony. Certainly he was a Purple Heart man because he got his whack. He was whacked 2 or 3 times. So I always have great respect for a man that wears a Purple Heart. And most of them go about the business very quietly. They never know a doggone thing about him. So it's kind of like our guest this morning. He goes about his business quietly because he has to. So, Judith K., why don't you introduce our guest this morning? Local boy done good, as they say.
Local boy done good, all right. Tom Brewster was a policeman here in Lincoln. He's really been in one form or another of law enforcement ever since way back when. And now...
That was when they carried nightsticks and bobby hats.
Yeah. And now he's an author, and in his first book he's got a little blurb about the author. And you come from a nice big family, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Why, when they said go forth and multiply,
my mom and dad had the right idea.
Yeah, they accepted that as gospel, all right. Yeah,
they sure did. And you were a veteran as well, right?
Yes.
And the book that I read last night, your second book, I really enjoyed, and there was a big thing in there about Vietnam, and it reminded me of my family members who were there and talked about it.
See, I want to point out that we on Viewpoint do our due diligence, and we do try to do a little research and reread these things periodically. Sometimes if it's the last minute, but we still read them.
Yeah. So Tom is with us today, and he's going to talk primarily about the author business rather than the law enforcement business, although we'd sure like to hear some of that too. Do you ever miss being a policeman with a gun on your hip and a hat on your head?
Well, you know, they say once a cop, always a cop. And I still think like a cop. And almost...
Sorry to hear that.
Almost all of my friends are policemen. And
sure.
I don't know if it's like this for most people, but after you get to be about 35, 40 years old, you really don't make a lot of intimate friendships with people. So all of my intimate friends, all the people that I trust and that I associate with are all cops or ex-cops.
Well, there's a bond there that
Yes,
we on the outside can't penetrate that bond because we have no cognizance of the things that you guys face day in and day out. And it may seem pretty simple here in what I call Abesville, as far as being a law enforcement officer is concerned. It seems so on the surface of the thing. We're going to have Chief Paul Adams next week, and we're not going to talk about anything in particular because of security and so forth. But I think all of us would be staggered to know some of the things that do go on in the background that we have no knowledge of.
Well, exactly.
Some of them very, very serious, and some of them very, very dangerous.
Yes.
I've heard police work described as being hours of boredom interspersed with moments of sheer terror. Is that pretty apt?
I think that's pretty much exactly the truth, because there are hours where you go without having to call, and all of a sudden you'll have some kind of sometimes even mini riot goes on, and you've got to be ready to go to do your job, whether it's to be able to talk somebody down or to be able to get physically involved with them. Most people see a police car going down the road and they think, well, there goes a cop car, but they're going somewhere to do something. And many times it's to answer some kind of violent call. And you can't imagine after a lot of indulgence in alcohol, how just regular, ordinary people can be pretty violent. And on a Friday and a Saturday night, when there's been a lot of alcohol intake, and these police officers are getting these calls to go to people's homes and to the taverns and stuff like that, the people are angry before they ever get there.
You use the term talk people down. Now, that's an expression that none of us have any real cognizance of, no knowledge whatsoever, because that's a skill, and that's a honed skill. You have to learn that. You just don't suddenly learn how to do that. Let's address that just a minute here, Tom. Let's say I'm an irate guy, and that never happened, really. But no, and I've got a gun on my lap. Real potential danger. How do you approach that?
Well, I know what I did, and I know the people that I worked with, what they did, but it's been a long time since I was a cop. But the first thing that you've got to do with somebody like that is you've got to tell them that you understand why they're mad. You can't go in and, say, what kind of an idiot are you?
Yeah.
You have to go in with the idea that you're going to talk this person down, and the first thing that you got to do is to be able to tell them that you understand why they're mad and that you are their friend, more or less say that you're on their side until we get this thing resolved and get people down to a point where that they can be reasoned with. Because a lot of times these cops that go on these calls, they run into people that just can't be reasoned with. I mean, the only thing that they can see is when you walk in that you're just another enemy to them.
Especially with a mind with alcohol or drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they start to realize that you're not there, that you're not going to hurt them, that you're there to help, well, then they'll come back down a little bit, give you some room to manipulate, to be able to talk them into a point where that they want to, kind of cooperate with you. But if you go in there with the wrong attitude, a lot of times you better be pretty physically fit, because if you go in with the wrong attitude, you're going to be in some kind of a brawl. So my hat's off to the cops that can get these people talked down and be able to resolve a situation without any violence, because it does take an act.
That's a skill.
If one goes into that job with what I've heard referred to as the police mentality, they have to get over that pretty quickly, don't they?
They do, and I never had a policeman's mentality, because I never thought I would ever be a policeman in the first place.
Oh.
And I do remember when I went back to my hometown and I told my old math teacher that I was on the police department, she said, well, I thought you would be in jail rather than on the police department.
Said it with love and respect, though.
Yeah, of course.
Well, you were a middle child. That makes it difficult.
And but Jim Springer, a good friend of mine, he was on the police department, and I was just looking for something to do one day, and he said, why don't you ride with me? You know, we got a policy where that people can ride with us. And so I said, okay, I'll ride with you. And they had some kind of training session going on out behind where the old Heritage place used to be. There was a car out there, and they had the Jaws of Life thing, and they were having an exhibition on how to do that. And he introduced me to John Wadesky, who was the chief, and some of the other guys, and I thought, well, these guys, I've always kind of been nervous around them, because I think they want to write me a ticket, and I don't have that much money, so I try to avoid cops as much as I can. But because of that meeting with all those guys, I thought, well, these are just regular guys, you know, and people that I think I could get along with. And so Jim talked to me about making an application, and I thought, well, what could it hurt? You know, at the end of the day, I put in my application, and luckily I got the job. So,
and that started a whole new career for you. Now you've been retired from the active police force for several years.
Yes.
And you found a new business in the course of your police work.
Yes, I did.
Private investigator, I Spy.
Right. Well, not exactly, but
wasn't that where the guy talked in his shoe? Wasn't that program?
That was me, actually. No, I wanted to say one other thing before I move on. But the first day that I went to work on the police department, my daughter was born. I had to leave my first day of duty to go to the hospital, and that was August the 2nd, which is my daughter Allison's birthday.
So happy birthday to Allison.
Oh, today.
Yes,
today.
Allison Gomez. And we've had her sitting right where you are as a very good interview. She does a whale of a job in her capacity. So happy birthday to Tom's daughter Allison, by golly.
And to my wife, too. She did all the work.
Yeah. Did she take off to have Allison? Did it take off work a little bit?
No, I had to take off work. She was already off.
How did you find yourself suddenly in the profession of being an investigator? Well, we hear about these investigators, of course, all kinds of stories abound about a private spy and all that, and all these domestic investigations. But you're a professional and do commercial work and that type of thing. Describe that for us. Well,
you know, I've had, first of all, the way that your first question was how I got involved in it was, it's kind of I loved being a policeman. I mean, I really liked the job. But my wife, she had a goiter in her neck, a big knot. And I was really concerned about that. And I thought, you know, if there's something turns out, and back then they couldn't find out in a day, you know, whether or not it was serious. But she had that, and I thought, you know, I should be able to work somewhere where that I could just work straight days, so that if there is a serious problem with her, that I can be there. And Roger Thompson offered me a job. In fact, you know, I could say that he recruited me for the job to be his investigator. And
for the state's attorney's office here in the county.
For the state's attorney's office here in Logan County. And just because of the two situations, because my wife had that goiter, we didn't know what the situation was going to be on it. I knew that I was only going to have one chance to take this job from Roger. I knew I couldn't put it off, so that was one of the reasons why I said yes. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll do that. I like the idea of being working straight days and interesting job as an investigator for a guy that I really liked. I really liked Roger Thompson. He was a little odd in some ways, but he had a brilliant mind.
Yes.
I do remember that if Roger Thompson asked you about a conversation that you had 6 months ago, you better say the same thing, because he could remember what you said, And so I went to work for Roger as an investigator, and then when Roger lost the election, which I was stunned that he did, because he was so good at his job. Then he asked me to go, take the private detective test so that I could work for him in a private capacity. And he knew that he wouldn't have enough work for me, so he knew that I'd need to have other clients too. So under his advisement, I went and took the test, and I got a private detective license. But that was I was still the chief. I went over to Mason City as the chief of police then for 5 years before I actually got completely involved in the private detective work, which my work has mostly been just the legal process work, filing stuff at the courthouses and doing that kind of legal stuff, background work for law offices and other companies. But I also, over the years, I had a number of companies that we, like a couple of companies, and I can't name them because, that's why they call it private, where that we had cases where there were deliveries that were going on, and this is pretty common too. Some of the stuff disappears in the deliveries, and once the employer gets onto it, these things are going on, then they'd call me and they'd say, can you check us out for a week or for a few days and put together a group of investigators that work for me. I've had several investigators work for me over the years, and then we would do a surveillance, find out if they're making stops and things like that. And a lot of times we would find out that they were making, unauthorized and unusual stops, and then we'd report that back to the employer and with our reports, and then they would take action from there. And I also had a number of clients that had us do actual, just sort of like, you would call it honesty checks. Like they wouldn't have any reason to think that anything was going on, but you'd have an honesty check. You'd follow the vans. You'd go into their places of business and do, preliminary investigations. Most of the time you'd find out there wasn't anything going on, but once in a while you would make your reports on that, and then you'd take it from there. And we do the process service for law offices, where you actually go out and find people and serve the summonses. And I'm down to one employee now because I'm 70 years old, so I'm not really wanting to do a lot of work. But based on that and my experience in law enforcement, I like to write. In fact, I wrote...
That's pretty evidently clear when you read your books.
Yeah, I wrote The Hung Jury whenever I was 31 years old, the book that you've got in your
31?
right there.
Well, that was a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah. And I submitted it to a few publishers. I had one publisher contact me, and this was back before they had these self-publishing companies, and wanted to publish The Hung Jury as I'd written it. And but they wanted me to front some money. And so I wrote them back, and I said, because everything was done by mail then, I said, any book's good enough to be published is good enough to make money on. So I said, you don't pay to be published, you get paid to be published. And so I never heard from them anymore. And that book sat there for, 25, 30 years. And then my daughter Allison read it. And she said, Dad, that's a good book. She said, we could get it published. And I said, well, I've submitted it, and the only publisher that wanted it was somebody that was going to charge me money to do it. And I said, I don't want to do that. She said, but everything's changed now. She said, they got these self-publishing things where that you can do the self-publishing, and she said, you get a lot of exposure. And so I thought about it, and she said, I'm going to do it. She said, I'm going to publish that book for you for your birthday, The Hung Jury there. And so I read it, and I thought, this book is so outdated, it's not going to be applicable to today's the way that police, have all the information, the forensics and things like that. So I called her and I said, don't publish that book. I said, because it's not good enough. And she said, I'm going to anyway. And I said, well, if you give me a couple of weeks, I said, I'll write another one and you can publish it if you want to give me a birthday present.
A couple of weeks?
So I wrote a book called The Great American Novel, which was actually my favorite book because it actually was more about stuff that happened to me throughout my life and about people that I know that I haven't been in contact for a long time. And so she published that book, self-published it, which, means you pay them.
Yeah, pay them.
And it sold a few copies, but I always thought
enough to get the cost back?
Oh, yeah, enough to get the cost back.
Wonderful.
But I always thought I really would have liked to have gotten that book into the hands of a publisher. But after writing that, I sort of got the bug. So I went and got the hung jury back out, and I looked at it, and I read it, and I thought, well, I could update that book. And so I rewrote most of it, but I rewrote the beginning of it and I made this guy an old guy instead of a young guy, and looking back on the past.
Well, we're going to talk about the hung jury, but I'll tell you what's going to happen. Our sponsors are going to hang us high and dry if we don't give them some time.
Well, yeah, you got
so we're going to go right in, Mr. Ash. Then we're going to come back to Tommy Brewster and the hung jury. I want to talk about that book. Right back live in the studios here. The program is Viewpoint. We have a local boy done good author right here. We have Mr. Tom Brewster, former actively engaged in the profession of police work, and now is a kind of quasi-retired, semi-retired private investigator. Would that be a correct?
Yeah, that's getting close.
All right. 648-5510. We're going to talk about a book that if you lived in Skinny Alleys, New York, it would be a good book, well written. But the folks here in Aibesville, if they read the hung jury, they automatically go to the Russell Smirker case, immediately. And as you sit there and read your book, Mr. Brewster, you try to put this character in your book with a certain character in Lincoln, Illinois.
Exactly.
And it's inevitable. That's just the way. The book is very, very well written. And I'm going to give you a little example of the prose that Mr. Brewster uses. I thought it was... Here's a descriptive way to write about the town. It was quiet and peaceful in Willoughby Hills, that of course is Aibesville. Cabin fever was on the decline. The dirty snowdrifts were gone, and warm breezes sailed across the prairie into calm, rushing harmony. Still, at any moment, the quiet might instantly change. Well, I thought that's pretty descriptive. You do that throughout your book, sir.
Well,
now,
thank you.
How did you weave this novel, which is fiction, about something that was very real and very certain here in Lincoln, Logan County when we had some murders?
It was, and a lot of people know this, and a lot of people don't, because there's a lot of rumor that circulates around that Russell Smirker case. And when I started to write the hung jury back when I was 30-something years old, I did have it in my mind to write a book about the Russell Smirker case. But when I sat down and really thought about it, I'd written several pages, several chapters, and I thought, I really can't do this. I can't write about the people that were on the police department. I can't write. And Jay Fry was a friend of mine too, and he was one of the victims in the Russell Smirker murder cases. And I thought, I can't do that. I can't say things about people. I can't bring out idiosyncrasies about a person's personality or the way that they behaved on the police department. So I've got to put this down. And I put it down. Finally, I came back to it, and I thought, well, I'm going to fictionalize everything. All of my characters are going to be fictionalized characters, and that way I don't ruffle anybody's feathers or rub people the wrong way. And but I kind of got a guide here. This was a very interesting murder case. and not to demean the people that were victims, but anybody that would know know about what happened and the details of this case would find it to be interesting. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, it's interesting to me, so I'm just going to create a situation with fictional characters sort of based on the chronology of the events of that case. And I got into a little bit of trouble about it. A daughter to one of my good friends who's passed away even had a little bit of a scrape with me on Facebook about me not claiming that it was based on a true story. Yeah. And it's not really based on a true story because there's just too much that's not real. It's mostly fiction, but there is a little bit of influence of that actual Russell Smirker murders case involved in there, but not enough that you could claim it to be based on a true story. If I would have said it was based on a true story, I know that people would have been interested and they would have grabbed onto it right away. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to falsify anything in the book. I want it to be known as a fiction, and that it's not at all based on the reality of those. But as you read your book, if you're in Lincoln, Illinois, it's inevitable that you're going to try to relate this character. Now, who's he talking about there? Yeah, exactly. Or this character, now who's that? Yep. If you were around here at that time and know the Smirker story and the Ruth Martin story, you know that this is so-and-so, but then, well, no, that can't be that. So it's interesting to read the book and kind of put together people who you think you might be writing about. Yeah. You've done a good job of fictionalizing a very riveting story. Well, thank you for that. You could say that it was inspired. You couldn't say it's based on a true story. You could say it was inspired by a true story, and that'd probably be more accurate. What we want to do is sell some books here. Oh, I hope that people buy them. You have 3 books that you published. I've got 3 published books, but The Long Winter's Night was published by a company that advertises just like World Castle as a legitimate publisher, but they're not really. I mean, if I didn't buy the copies myself, I probably wouldn't have sold any, because they were just that's kind of there's a lot of that goes on now. They try to get authors hooked into making publishing, and then you got your heart and soul invested in these books and these writings, and so they know that you're going to buy some of them. Mm-hmm. So they print them up and then they sell you a few. But I never fell for that, because I'm the guy that says if the book doesn't sell, then that's it's not good enough. Well, you're probably not an easy fellow to hoodwink. No, I'm not. I'm pretty tight. No, he's been around the barn a couple times. Yeah. Exactly. Well, now, let's talk about publishing. The Hung Jury, that's the folks that's the book here that the folks in Lincoln, Logan County ought to be interested in, because it is locally based, and as I say, everyone who was alive and around here at that time will know immediately. They'll try to associate all these characters with so and so. Where can we buy? I'm sold. I don't buy books anymore. I got this from Tom Brewster's house. Where can this book be bought? Well, you can get it on any of the book sites on the internet. You can get it at Amazon, Kindle. You can get it at Barnes & Noble's site. You can get it. All you have to do, there's another book called Hung Jury that's out right now. So if you go on there, it's a more popular book. You have to put that "the" in there to get this book. Yeah, you have to put "the" in there. And in order to get it to come right up, if you put my name in parentheses, Tom Brewster, it'll come right up. And it's you can get your soft copy like that in just a few days if you order it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And it's sells right now for I think $11.50 for the soft copy. It's inexpensive for a book today. Yeah, really. I just bought one by Greg Iles for $45. Yeah. So of course he autographed it. That made it more valuable. Yeah. But and you can get, if you got a reader, electronic reader like the Nook or the Kindle, it's $3.99. So, and you can get that immediately. So.
You know, those things are very nice, but there's nothing like having a book in your lap to read as opposed to electronic readers. I've gotten some books on that, and I've read some books on mine, but it's not the same as reading a book in your lap. But Judith Kay reads a lot, and I know that.
It's my sin.
And I was amazed that you read the book in one sitting.
Well, I made up my mind. I said, time got away on me, Tom. And all of a sudden I realized, God, we're going to have Tom Brewster, and I haven't read that book. So I am a pretty avaricious reader, and I can go through a book and remember it pretty well. And so I sat down yesterday about noon and went through the book until I wanted to make it by time this morning. So we did, comfortably.
I finished the book while I was watching my youngest great-grandchild, Liam, who's 3. And he got interested in something which is highly unusual. He's got the attention span of a gnat. At 3,
He's talking about her grandson, not me.
No, the great. Well, anyway, where were you in your professional life during the time that this happened in Lincoln? Also, that's a great picture of the courthouse on the front of the book.
My nephew, Taylor Long, took that picture. We went up there like at 11 o'clock at night, and
it's really pretty.
He had a better phone than I did, and they wanted to go with, and they contacted me, and they wanted to go with a different cover, a police car with the lights on in a small town setting. And so I wrote back and I said I really would like to submit a picture that I would rather have on the cover than that. And so I sent the picture, electronically to the publisher, and they sent it back and said, well, the picture is not good enough, it's not clear enough, so you have to get either professional or someone to take the picture, and then we'll consider it. So my nephew had a brand new phone, and he's always got the best electronic equipment you can get, and he said, well, I'll try it. We'll go up and take a picture of the courthouse. I said, I want it to be at night, though. So we waited till about 11 o'clock at night, and went up and took the picture, and I submitted it, and they published it, and that's it. So,
well, it's a catching book cover. There's no question about that.
Let me say, I'd really like to know where you were in your professional life when this happened.
When these things that inspired me to write this book happened.
The inspiration, yes.
I was the policeman that answered the call to Kroger's when Russell Smirker was. They called on him that he had stolen these meat.
Shoplifted.
And whenever I got there, he was running across the parking lot, and I was able to run him down and catch him. And Ruth Martin, who was later on murdered, came up to me in the parking lot and had the stakes with her and said he threw these under my car. And so the manager of the Kroger's was there, and Jay Fry, who was the produce manager, he was there too, and he was sort of like Jay was sort of like the guy that caught the shoplifters too, because they didn't have security out there. And so arrested Russell Smirker and took him in, processed him, and actually let him out on a notice to appear, because he was just a college kid, and we had college kids all the time shoplifting, and that's the way you handled it. You didn't keep them in the cell, you just released them back out into the public. And he was a student over at Lincoln College. And then Ruth disappeared, and we searched this county from one end to the other. John Wadesky had every cop out that was available to see if we could find her, made a search for her, had the state police involved in it. And it wasn't like a little small town thing like we are, a little small town, but it was a pretty thorough search. Never came up with anything on her. And the detectives were on to him about that. They were sort of suspicious of him, but they didn't know. And then when Jay and Robin Fry were murdered, well, then it was clear. And I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to. Dan Hanlon was the attorney, public defender. He had defended Smirker on a couple of other things.
Yeah.
And he immediately, when he heard the news that they had been murdered, he put 2 and 2 together. These people were both witnesses against him on separate cases. But it was enough that he called the detectives. And then they had a session with Roger Thompson, and they decided, yes, this is the guy. So after that, we were, they were trying to keep a tail on him because he had to make an appearance on this shoplifting case at the courthouse. Well, previous to that, there was a jury trial on him on the records that he had stolen from a Lincoln College student, and his roommate was a witness, and his roommate disappeared too. So, that case went to trial, and there was a hung jury, and that's
the title.
That's where I came up with the title. That inspired me to.
Other than his troubles after he had moved to Lincoln, he had no troubled background?
Well, I think that he did have a troubled background, and I think there were several things that he was suspected of that never came to, light or ever any kind of cases that came to fruition on it, but I'm pretty sure that he was suspected of other things. But that's just hearsay on my part. I don't have any evidence, or I don't have any reports or anything like that to refer to on that, but I'm pretty sure that he didn't just start having problems when he got here to Lincoln,
He was back in the background somewhere.
Yeah,
he's still on the earth, isn't he?
He's dead. He died.
He died. Yeah.
He died a few years ago, and before he died, and I got this from Tony Solomon when Tony was the sheriff. Tony told me, he said that he had confessed to killing Ruth and to Jay and Robin Fry's murders, and that he had come back to Lincoln to try to help find their bodies. And this is also hearsay from Tony, but that it was they were buried somewhere under the highway out here because I-55 was under construction at the time, and that they drove up and down the highway, and because everything looks the same, he wasn't able to find a location where he thought that he had left their bodies. But
I don't know why Tony Solomon would ever lie to you.
Well, Tony always used to see me someplace at the courthouse. He'd say, "Hey, I still got those pictures of you."
Yeah. He was always with a picture.
Yeah, he was
648-5510. Our guest this morning is Mr. Thomas Brewster, retired policeman here in the city of Lincoln, and now quasi-retired private investigator. Let's talk about that career a minute, Mr. Brewster. You kind of walked into that because Roger Thompson needed an investigator in the state's attorney's office, and then that kind of morphed into he used your name various places, and by dint of reputation and diligence of your work, you begin to develop a reputation as a very good private eye. Didn't go around with a shoe phone like Don, whatever his name was.
That was funny, though.
Oh, yeah, it was.
So, tell us a little bit about that career. Immediately people think of, he's spying on so-and-so because their wife's going out with somebody. That is the kind of work you do.
I've never done that.
Yeah.
Never.
That's called domestic work.
Yeah, domestic work, and I just always felt like that was something. The private investigator. Private is the key word there, but I always thought that people's family problems and domestic things were private things, and I just felt very uneasy about doing something like that, and I never considered it. I've done some accident reconstruction investigations for different law firms and that kind of thing, but I just completely stayed away from the domestic stuff, except for that one case that I told you about earlier.
Yeah.
And that ended bad. So from that day on, I just decided never to.
Been there, done that, huh?
Now, corporate, would I be using the word correctly? Corporate investigating?
Yeah, that would be best.
Our mutual friend and neighbor shuts us off here. Since I read this, I want you to just address a little bit about A Long Winter's Night. I really enjoyed it. I read it too fast, but I thought it was really good, about a young kid with his best buddies, and they end up in the service, and they end up in Vietnam, and the man must have had PTSD, I would say.
Yeah, he had something. I got the idea for that book because I wrote that book after I wrote The Great American Novel. Dana and I and 5 other investors had invested in a technical school, the property, in South Haven, Mississippi. And Brian Huff, he started the Midwest Technical Institute here in Lincoln, then he moved it to Springfield, and now he's got maybe 5 different schools, but very, very successful guy. But my daughter knew him, and she put us together, and he said, I want another location for another school. So my daughter's always got her head, keyed in on that kind of stuff, and so she went to South Haven, Mississippi, and shopped around. We found a piece of property down there. It was over $1 million, and we 5 investors altogether invested in that, and Brian took Midwest Technical Institute and put a school there. And so for 5 years we were involved in that, and my wife was down there most of the time. And I told her the other night, I said, I really enjoyed that time because I had something to look forward to every day of the week. I knew I was going to get to go somewhere, and I was going to go down to Mississippi, and we were going to go to Memphis and stuff like that. And I was alone the rest of the week. But when I was alone, I was looking for something to do. I don't watch a lot of TV, and I didn't have anything interesting to read, so I'd written that first 2 books, and I thought, well, I'll try to write a book. And here I'm in my room, and there's snow on the ground outside, and I'm pretty much just living in that one room. I come home from work and have dinner and then go straight up to that room. And so I started writing this book, and I thought, well, this is a guy sort of like me. He's just all alone. And so I started writing this book about the guy being all alone and not having any concept of what was going on around him. And I developed this idea that he'd been in an accident. So I took the book from there, and he had to reconstruct his life. And as he reconstructed it, he remembered that part of it, and then he would be able to proceed on right up until the moment that he'd been involved in the shooting. Actually, it wasn't an accident, but he had been shot, and he was recuperating. And all the time while this was going on, he was having this demon that had come to visit him, and an angel, and there was a war between the angel and the demon to actually get the soul of this guy. And at the end, when he wakes up, he remembers his entire life, and then he remembers that he's been having this struggle about his belief in God throughout this, and then he goes there, in his mind, he goes, there is a God,
Yes.
And it was I wrote it in a hurry. I wrote the book in a real hurry, and I knew how to submit these things because I've been submitting, these books for a long time. And so they contacted me right away, and I didn't realize it was like they were shysters. So I've always thought I'd like to maybe rewrite that book and rewrite the Great American Novel and try to get them out there too, because I've had a little success with the hung jury, and I'd like to go back and revisit these other 2 books too a little bit,
Well, A Long Winter's Night by Tom Brewster is a mighty good read.
Well, thank you very much.
And you can while away the day inside and stay cool.
Yes.
Instead of going out. Tom Brewster, we appreciate you spending your time with us this morning. It's been very interesting to Judith and I, and hopefully to both those listeners out there. Tom has had a storied career in police work, and more importantly in private investigative work. That's something that about which none of us know anything at all, and we're the better off for it.
Exactly.
So we'll close with a quote that hopefully is analogous to something we talked about this morning, and it has to say about the investigator. The investigator should have a robust faith, yet not belief. Ponder that for a student. Thank you very much for Viewpoint. Thank you, Tom.